nodes, it's losing some CPU time. So if all you care about is expansion time to be reduced, all you care about is reducing the amount of time you spend on the heuristic, you go with this. All you care about is reducing the amount of time you spend on expansion, you would go with H star. Because I pointed out to you, H star does the absolute to the lowest number of expansions. It only expands the nodes that are on the perfect path from the root to the goal node with some minor qualifications. That's the best you can ever get. Right? So, neither this curve nor this curve is what you're trying to minimize. What you're trying to minimize is the summation of those two curves. Right? Because the total cost for A star search is the time you spend on computing the heuristic and the time you spend on expanding the states. There's nothing else left. So if you add up these curves, the curve you get would be like this. The 10 gazillion billion dollar question for any given problem is, where does this occur? Do you understand what I'm saying? It's not going to occur in H star. That much is clear. It's also not likely to occur in H0. That's also clear. We wouldn't have wasted time coming up with H star. But in search literature, most of the time, people used to assume, for even as recently as 10, 15 years back, people used to assume that heuristic should not take too much time to compute. It's a heuristic for crying out loud. It should be very fast to compute. That somehow means it's like making a meta assumption about how problems behave. You are somehow saying this dip is somewhere here. If you believe that heuristic should not take too much time to compute, then the dip is going to be somewhere here. Now, your biases are important in science. You understand that? I mean, people basically said, it cannot be anything other than things revolving around Earth. We are not even going to consider anything else. That's why we got stuck with Earth-centric theories for the longest time. Right? So if you are biased to think that heuristics should be cheap to compute, you wouldn't even try considering costly heuristics. And there was no obvious reason. Unless you actually draw this curve, you would not know for sure that costly heuristics won't pay their way. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's known that guaranteed that the two extremes are bad. But where do you think the minimum occurs? The assumption was that somehow heuristics have to take low polynomial time. So things like, Manhattan distance or Manhattan distance heuristic or the displaced tiles heuristic or something like that. But now people increasingly realize that you can spend significant amount of time in computing the heuristic itself. There is this idea called pattern database heuristics, for example, which basically says for something like 8 puzzle problem that, okay, I want to finally get to this, right? Let me consider the pattern 3, 4, 5. Just that pattern. Act as if everybody else is nameless. One way of ignoring people is to assume they have no faces. When they have no faces, they can be shifted around. Right? So actually go ahead and keep 3, 4, 5 and make everything else white space. It's not blank space, it's a white tile. So then there could be multiple states that are different in terms of the relative configurations of 1, 2, 8, 6, 7, and 6, but they're all the same state now as far as you're concerned. The state space has become much smaller. And then I'll be asking, given any configuration, right now in this configuration, the important thing is 3, 4, 5 and a bunch of white spaces. Now those 3, 4, 5 have to come here. And I need to shift things around. I can actually do full search on that smaller problem. Full optimal search on that smaller problem. Because it's smaller than number of tiles, which is 8 tiles. Instead of 8 tiles, you're looking at 3 tiles. Because everybody else is equal. But it's going to take a longer time to compute that heuristic than just counting the number of misplaced tiles or adding up the number of the Manhattan distance. This is what's called pattern database heuristics. And one of the most interesting things is pattern database heuristics take much longer time. So in our picture here, they're kind of somewhere here. People weren't even considering them. There was just no hope. Why should heuristic be taking such a costly time? I'm just saying it's exponential, but it's smaller exponent. And people who are not interested in computing exponential heuristics at all. And yet, ultimately, the proof is in the pudding. If you were to compute pattern database heuristics for 8 puzzle problem, actually 8 puzzle, it doesn't matter. If you take 24 puzzle, okay, or 36 puzzle problems, you know, if you don't compute pattern database heuristics and you're trying to compute optimal plans, optimal sequences, it takes forever. In fact, back in 2005, I remember we had this paper that Richard Karff was one of the people who came up with the idea. He's not the only guy, but actually Kalboshan and Schaefer came up with the idea of pattern database heuristics. And Richard Karff is crazy about doing search, in the optimal way, and he uses 8 puzzle or Rubik's Cube as his, vehicles. And there was some problem for which he was just trying to compute the optimal solution, and the reviewer said, you haven't computed the solution, there is a blank there. And the review basically takes about a month time, and then people are given a day to respond to the criticisms. And Richard Karff comes back in the criticism response phase saying, it just completed, month later, and here is the answer. So you can actually, even for very simple problems like a puzzle and Rubik's Cube, if you do not use right heuristics, it can take forever. These are huge, huge spaces. And the fact that the best performance might actually come with the costlier heuristic, costlier to compute heuristic, and that you should try it before just making up your mind, saying, they'll never work. A heuristic should be cheap to compute. Yeah, if you compute cheap heuristic, you will do a lot of expansions. Okay, I'm not saying all costly heuristics will win either, but it's not guaranteed that costly heuristics will die, because it's all a question of other problem where this particular minimum is likely to occur. One other thing I want to mention about heuristics with respect to path planning is again abstractions about the path planning, right? So I said path planning is again hitting the people who are sleeping, remember? So the disappearing and abstractly assume that everybody has disappeared other than the people that I want to hit on the head. There the shortest solution is just the straight line distance. And next level of abstraction, which is more concrete, more closer to the reality, is to assume that all of you are spheres. Some of you actually look like spheres probably, but and I'm not pointing fingers, but let's assume that all of you are spheres, maybe cylinders, whatever. And the question is, if you are spheres, in some sense, I can shrink the spheres into point and then make the space bigger. And then I can compute the shortest path, which involves essentially not going through the obstacles. In fact, when you have spheres, of course, the circular abstraction, you essentially compute, the tangents, and then you have to go on the tangents to the shortest one. It's more complicated than this, but it's more informed. Okay. Now I can say, not sphere. Some of you will obviously vehemently object, saying, I'm not a sphere at all. I'm more polygonal. I have many-sided, personality. Right? So I'll put a polygonal abstraction. You notice that the actual, these are the outlines. I mean, this almost looks like crime scene, whatever thing, but these are the actual, the shapes of the obstacles that I remove. Okay? Here I just removed them completely. Here I just put the biggest sphere that I can put into them. And I said, that's what the abstract, that's what the actual projection of the obstacle is. And here I'm putting a polygonal abstraction. Now notice that the polygons are actually giving you a better idea of what the obstacle looks like. So it's a better abstraction than this. Right? So if you do path planning with polygonal abstractions of the obstacles, you will get faster path planning algorithms. Notice that you will get optimal path with this, or even this. But the question is, which is faster? The faster would be the admissible, which is closer to H star. One last question, right? Why did I inscribe the circles? Why didn't I circumscribe, no, not you, circumscribe the circle. Somebody who is sleeping, wake up and answer. This guy actually I can see, but anyway. So why somebody else, can answer? Why not circumscribe circles? Yes.
To do with the lower bound thing.
Exactly. If I circumscribe, you basically get path lengths that are longer than the true path lengths. It's funny, right? Basically, we are saying another way of remembering admissibility is that rose-colored glasses will guarantee optimality. If you think everything is upsy-daisy, everything is going to be fine, which is basically assuming that the future is going to have lower cost than what it is actually going to have, you would get optimal solution. It's just that the search process might take too long for you to actually finish the search. If you assume the future is going to be completely dark, you will get an extremely efficient thinking because you will go and commit suicide right away. Right? And you're done. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm not at all, I hope you understand what I'm saying. Okay. This is not a homework assignment by any means. Right? So the point is, if you are pessimistic, there are all sorts of these neat interesting connections you can make. If you are pessimistic, search is fast, but the solutions are not optimal. If you are optimistic, solutions are optimal. But if you're too optimistic, you die looking for the solution. So get yourself the right kind of rose-colored glasses. I'll tell you what to watch before you come to the next class. Come back to next class.